Today is June 25th. It's the 176th day of the year, and this is the On This Day podcast. On this day in 1906, Pennsylvania millionaire Harry Thaw murders the renowned architect Stanford White. Stanford White designs homes for New York's wealthiest families, as well as commercial and civic buildings. And he's also having an affair with Harry Thaw's wife, actress and chorus girl Evelyn Nesbit. Stanford White is a partner in the prestigious architectural firm McKim, Mead & White, designers of many of New York City's most prominent buildings. White's own designs include the Washington Square Arch, the second Madison Square Garden, Bowery Savings Bank, the Century Club, the Boston Public Library, and Boston's Hotel Buckminster, the NYU Library, now part of Bronx Community College, the George Seeley House in Galveston, Texas, several Newport cottages, the Rhode Island mansions of the Gilded Age, including Rosecliff and the H.A.C. Taylor House, and Hyde Park, the Vanderbilt mansion on the Hudson River. And Stanford White is also a player. He's tall and charming, witty and sophisticated. He's a collector of expensive art, rare antiquities, and young women. White is a married man. He and his wife have a luxurious estate on Long Island called Box Hill. But he keeps an apartment in the city for entertaining. Stanford White meets Evelyn Nesbit when she's 16. He's 47. She thinks he seems terribly old. However, she is taken by him and by the opulence of the multi-story apartment he maintains above F.A.O. Schwartz on 24th Street, a residence he has designed for the purposes of seduction. Evelyn Nesbit grows up destitute in Pennsylvania. Her father dies when she is 11, and her mother struggles to make ends meet. By the time she's 14, Evelyn is working at Wanamaker's department store, earning money to support her family. She falls into a modeling career, posing for portraits by Philadelphia artists and sculptors, and discovers she can make a lot more money sitting still for 5 hours than she ever could at Wanamaker's. She moves to New York, continues posing for portraits, and is soon featured on the cover of magazines such as Vanity Fair, Ladies' Home Journal, and Cosmopolitan. Nesbit also begins acting and working as a chorus girl on Broadway in a production called Florodora, performing in the chorus as one of the Florodora girls. There she meets actress Edna Goodrich, another Florodora girl, who introduces Nesbit to Stanford White. White invites Nesbit over for lunch at his 24th Street apartment. It is a resplendent afternoon that starts with an expensive and sumptuous meal from Delmonico's and ends with Nesbit swinging in a red velvet swing hung in the green room on one of the apartment's upper floors, with White pushing her higher and higher. After more time spent together over the ensuing weeks, Nesbit returns to White's apartment for dinner and champagne, followed by a visit to the mirror room on the same upper floor, more champagne, and then Nesbit has no memory of what happens after that in the time between the champagne and waking up next to White in a compromising position. White becomes her benefactor. Nonetheless, Nesbit also sees other men: actor John Barrymore, magazine publisher Robert Collier, and then she meets the son of a Pennsylvania railroad baron, Harry Thaw. Thaw has never known poverty. As a child, he's a troublemaker, prone to temper tantrums and described by his teachers as unintelligent. As an adult, he boasts about having studied poker at Harvard. and lights his cigars with $100 bills. And he suffers debilitating bouts of mental instability throughout his life. Thaw is expelled from Harvard, so he decides to climb the rungs of the social ladder, applying for membership at all of the most elite clubs in New York City. He is rejected from just about all of them and is convinced that it is Stanford White's doing, certain that White is out to ruin him. As crazy as he is, there may be some truth to that. When Evelyn Nesbit meets Harry Thaw, after Thaw has attended more than 40 performances of her play, she tells White, who cautions her against getting involved with Thaw, telling her to ditch the zero. I'm paraphrasing that, of course. But Thaw manages to insert himself into Nesbit's life and pursues her hand in marriage relentlessly. It is when they go abroad to Europe together that things come to a head in many ways for Nesbit and Thaw. Thaw is not only obsessed with Evelyn Nesbit, he is also obsessed with female chastity. She reveals to him the truth about her relationship with Stanford White and the night he had his way with her. Thaw is none too pleased to hear that, and he alters their European itinerary, taking them to visit the birthplace of the virgin martyr Joan of Arc, writing in the visitor's log, quote, "She would not have been a virgin if Stanford White had been around." And then Thaw takes her to stay in an Austrian castle for a few weeks, locking her in a room, holding her prisoner, and physically abusing her for 2 weeks straight. Thaw and Nesbit return to America and are wed in April of 1905. The bride wore black, and at long last, Evelyn Nesbit has the financial stability she's desired all her life. Stanford White hadn't planned to be at the Roof Garden Theater at Madison Square Garden on this night in 1906. He's scheduled to be in Philadelphia for business. It's a last-minute change of plans when his son arrives in New York unexpectedly. They have dinner at Martin's, which is the dining establishment patronized by Thaw and Nesbit on that evening as well. Thaw sees White across the room. After dinner, White and his 19-year-old son Lawrence attend the premiere of Mam'selle Champagne at the Roof Garden Theater, as do Thaw and Nesbit. During the finale number, Thaw approaches White from behind, pistol in hand, and says, "You've ruined my wife." He pulls the trigger 3 times. Stanford White dies almost immediately on this day in 1906 in the building that is one of his most well-known designs, Madison Square Garden. For many years afterward, young Lawrence White is racked with guilt for having kept his father in New York that fateful night. He later writes, quote, "On the night of June 25, 1906, while attending a performance at Madison Square Garden, Stanford White was shot from behind by a crazed profligate whose great wealth was used to besmirch his victim's memory during the series of notorious trials that ensued." And the trials are notorious indeed. There's a media frenzy with reporters digging up the most sensational and salacious aspects of the participants' lives, Thaw, Nesbit, and White. The tabloid press has a field day, with both the defense and the prosecution feeding reporters scoops that might benefit the perception of their respective sides. The press dubs Thaw's trial the trial of the century, and that sells a lot of newspapers. It is, of course, just the beginning of the century, and the Thaw murder trial takes place years before Leopold and Loeb, Scope's Monkey, the Lindbergh kidnapping trial, Nuremberg, Charlie Manson, and O.J. Simpson. Thaw's first trial ends in a hung jury, but in his second trial, Harry Thaw is found not guilty by reason of insanity for murdering Stanford White on this day in 1906. Stanford White's Madison Square Garden is demolished in 1925, replaced with the landmark New York Life Building, designed by Cass Gilbert. After the second trial, Evelyn Nesbit has a child, Russell Thaw, conceived, she says, on a conjugal visit with her husband at the State Hospital for the Criminally Insane. Thaw denies paternity for the rest of his life. In 1913, Harry Thaw walks off the hospital grounds and escapes to Canada. He is extradited back to New York, given a new trial, and in 1915 is found not guilty and no longer insane. There are 189 days left in the year.